only got to listen to it, and you're listening to England.
And you've got to maintain this control over your bow at a point where you're feeling really quite moved by everything.
It is, I think, the most wonderful piece of music I've ever heard in my life, and I doubt if I'll hear anything better.
The Lark Ascending, an iconic piece of music that appeals to myriads of people of every walk of life. What's its secret? For 70 years, the BBC has invited castaways to choose their desert island discs. The Lark Ascending by Vaughan Williams has been chosen by a surprisingly eclectic group, from the late Archbishop of Canterbury, Robert Runcie, to Rolling Stones drummer Charlie Watts and comedian Vic Reeves, who liked it so much he chose to play it at his wedding.
When I first heard the Lark Ascending, it sent shivers. It still does send shivers through me. I'm having a shiver now, even thinking about it, but it does, you know, there's 2 points in it. There's the 2 big crescendos, and that was the first time I think I got a physical feeling from a bit of music.
Today is the day when the nation is cast away. This is your Desert Island Disc.
Recently, the Radio 4 programme invited its audience to make their own choice. And top of the listeners' list?
At number 1, The Lark Ascending by Vaughan Williams.
I once saw the man who wrote it. I just stared at him and I thought, yes, this man has written one piece of music called The Lark Ascending. And that piece of music speaks for England. And when I'm buried, if they'd like to bury me with a copy of The Lark Ascending, I could play it all the time and really have a good time.
Despite its quintessential Englishness, Vaughan Williams' most popular work has transcended any nationalistic overtones. For the 10th anniversary of 9/11, for instance, New York Public Radio listeners chose The Lark as one of the pieces of music to commemorate the day. Although probably less well known than his contemporaries, Elgar and Holst, Vaughan Williams is, for many, one of the greatest English composers. In a career that spanned 2 world wars, he produced a prolific canon of work, from 9 symphonies and the Tallis Fantasia to countless choral pieces and his legendary hymn tunes. In much of his music, his influences are clear. Vaughan Williams had a special fascination with traditional English folk songs. One of his great interpreters, the British violinist Tasmin Little, says it's the echoes of these old country tunes which imbue his work with the essence of Englishness. Vaughan Williams was very interested in folk music. Is there anywhere in this piece where you're aware of that influence?
Yes, in a lot of old folk music you get a lot of parallel fifths, so things like that. And even the opening, he chooses to use these fifths in the opening. In a lot of very ancient music that monks used to chant, it uses again these parallel motions. And I'm wondering if there is something that evokes spiritual or religious feelings within us when we get taken back to that ancient form of music making.
The deep connection with traditional folk music certainly resonates with the time The Lark Ascending was written. It was 1914, the war was just beginning, and the threat loomed that the old ways of England might change forever. The story goes that Vaughan Williams was composing whilst looking out over the channel where the English fleet was gathering. A Boy Scout, suspecting he was spying for the enemy, arrested him, leading to a caution from the local police. Work on the piece, however, was soon curtailed. Vaughan Williams went off to war as an ambulance driver. It would be 6 years before he picked up the music again. In 1920, Vaughan Williams was invited to a house party here at King's Weston in Bristol. Among the guests was a woman to whom he dedicated The Lark, violinist Marie Hall. Marie was from a very poor but musical family. Spotted busking on the streets, her talents later brought her worldwide acclaim. Here at King's Weston, she worked with Vaughan Williams on the score of The Lark. Together they prepared for its first public performance in the local hall at Shire Hampton, on the outskirts of Bristol. Just how much influence did such an extraordinary woman bring to bear on this iconic music? I've come to the British Library to see the original handwritten score.
Sandra, it's always a pleasure to meet experts in a field that I'm not very knowledgeable about. And you're the curator of music here at the British Library, and you have, wonder of wonders, the original manuscript.
Yes, this is the original of Vaughan Williams' The Lark Ascending. And he dedicated it to Marie Hall. You see her name at the top here. And there's a poem here, The Lark Ascending, words by George Meredith, which he used as the inspiration for his piece. You can see that it's written for violin and piano. This was the version that was performed first. And he met Marie Hall and they went through the score together and made quite a lot of changes so that it really showed off her talents to best advantage.
Do you think he accepted her suggestions?
I think he did. I think they worked together on it so that it was really designed to fit her talents. And you can see here whole sections have been rewritten and new bits of paper have been pasted over the top of the originals. And there are lots of crossings out.
My goodness. He was quite adamant about that bit, wasn't he?
Absolutely, that bit had to go. And right at the end here, you can see that he's completely rewritten the end, pasted another sheet of paper on with a very extravagant flourish for the violinist to finish on.
Has anybody tried to find out what he wrote under that?
Unfortunately, we
the
haven't.
The original ending.
Unfortunately, we can't take that off without damaging it, and so we haven't as yet been able to study what was underneath. It would be very interesting to actually see his original thoughts before Marie Hall started having an influence on it, because she must have had ideas of her own and decided that she wanted it this way or that way. So it would be nice to see what his first thoughts were.
The enormous influence exerted by Marie Hall and her prodigious talents has created a work loved and found challenging in equal measure by her counterparts today.
I'm just going to stop there because what I want to draw your attention to is the way that we've gone from the lower area of the instrument, almost as low as you can go on the violin, and certainly very low chords in the harmony, and he's taken us bit by bit, gradually. It's almost as if the bird has gradually opened the wings and expanded and expanded. So I've gone right from here to up here, which is, pretty much the length and breadth of the scope of the violin as well. The funny thing is that it sounds like it's so easy, and it's one of the hardest pieces to play because it calls for the most immense amount of control. I've got lots of notes to do, string crossings, all sorts of things, and yet it's just got to feel like the bird is just swooping down and up again, and it's just got to feel incredibly natural, but that's actually really difficult.
And when you're playing, are you aware of the effect that it has on the audience? Because it does have an immensely strong effect.
Actually, it has quite a strong effect on me. In fact, I probably can't think of a single time when I haven't felt very moved at the end. And that's one of the hardest places to play as well, because it gets higher and higher. Yet the challenge is just to keep it getting softer and softer until literally it just vanishes into thin air. There are so many times where music is such a force to elevate people, and the Lark Ascending is definitely one of the most supreme examples of a piece of music that can really draw people together.
I wonder what the great man himself would have made of the Lark's current popularity. I've arranged to meet someone who knew him well. As a young music critic, Michael Kennedy wrote a fan letter to the composer, which sparked a warm friendship.
What do you think made this piece so very popular?
Probably the advent of a lot of rather good young soloists like Tasmin Little, Nicola Benedetti and others who've picked it up, and people realised what a beautiful work it is. I've always thought that it was a masterpiece because it says so much in so little.
What do you think Vaughan Williams would have made of the popularity of this piece?
Well, I think he'd been slightly amazed. I'm very pleased, why not? And he'd probably say, what, that old thing? And he always used to say, though, that he didn't like his own music. A lot of work. When the Fourth Symphony and the Piano Concerto came out, he said, I wish I liked my stuff more than I do.
How fascinating. That wasn't modesty.
No, it wasn't modesty at all. I mean, he was a despair of his publishers because he wouldn't push anything. You know, he said once he'd written it, it had to make its own way in the world like a child.
So, time for the Lark to stand on its own merits.
It was here in the Shirehampton Public Hall close to Bristol that the Lark Ascending was first performed to the public.
Tonight, we're recreating that first performance by Marie Hall, not with a full orchestra, but as it was originally heard, for violin and piano. Performing tonight are pianist Charles Matthews and rising star, 15-year-old Julia Hwang. Was Vaughan Williams here to witness the birth of this music that would come to symbolise all he loved about his country? We don't know, but he did usually attend his premieres, so I'd rather like to think he was.
Listening to that performance, I've decided what makes this piece of music so universally loved. In a world that's riven with discord, wars across the globe and violence in our streets, for the 14 minutes that this piece lasts, Vaughan Williams has given us a world of perfect simplicity and harmony.